Okay, true story. I once knew this guy who said that Silence of the Lambs was a piece of shit movie, and that he hated it, and that it totally didn't deserve to win any of the Oscars. Well, I'll tell you, I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Sorry, I had to do that. I tried so hard not to do that, but I had to. Anyway, today's review, or this review that I'm doing right now, Silence of the Lambs. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. I can't tell you how many times I've watched this movie. Um, I have all the editions of like on VHS, on DVD. Now I have the Blu-ray, which is really spiffy looking Blu-ray. Lots of good special features, stuff like that. And of course, if you know my channel at all, of course I am a big fan of the Thomas Harris series of Hannibal. I've talked about the NBC Hannibal show quite a bit. Manhunter, Red Dragon. There is something though about Silence of the Lambs that makes it set apart from the rest, and probably what it is the Clarice character, played brilliantly by Jodie Foster in this movie, who won the Academy Award. Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter won the award for Best Actor. Jonathan Demme won Best Director, and the movie, of course, won Best Picture of the Year, which is really cool that a movie like this. Not only that, but like the movie, this originally in 1991. This came out in February 14th, Valentine's Day. Um, for a movie like that to make it all the way to the Academy Awards after that amount of time, that's something. I mean, nowadays, like I was a little kid in the '90s, but um, nowadays we can pretty much guarantee if a movie is released in either January, February, that's like the dumping ground for absolute shit. Like you're not gonna see a good movie come out of there. So maybe it was the case at the time, or maybe not. But this movie is an absolute classic. I love it. I love it so much. Definitely my favorite among the Hannibal Lecter films. Um, Pretty much no comparison. Kind of, it is a little bit hard to describe exactly why it works as well as it does. A lot of it is kind of on a subconscious level because, of course, you have the great source material through Thomas Harris's novel. Um, Definitely, there is a kind of authenticity to it, in that he like takes real kind of cases, borrows from them. There's definitely some Dahmer and Bundy and whatever else, real life serial killer inspiration to this story. And as a police procedural, as a detective procedural, FBI procedural, what have you, film, I mean, it's definitely feels very authentic. Like it's not too Hollywoodized. Like you can definitely tell, like what you tell with a lot of these kind of movies, that the characters have their certain types of drives and sort of like an obsession to figure out the mystery. In this case, there is the serial killer, Buffalo Bill, who's abducting young ladies and murdering them. They, find them washed up in a creek somewhere, and if, what have you. And the main issue is Senator's daughter, Catherine Martin, is captured, and it becomes this clock ticking thriller. But it never really kind of talks down to you as an audience member. It really makes you kind of appreciate that there is certain procedures that these people have to follow, and certain, why they have the jobs that they have. It's not about, shooting, it's about thinking. It is a highly psychological film. So from that aspect, the police procedure feels very authentic, feels uh, like almost documentary, like almost, but it just feels like it does have a certain amount of realism to it, and it's not like super Hollywoodized, like not like today where it's like CSI. Oh, go to the lab, we'll get the blood sample. 5 minutes, boom, we got the guy. No, it's nothing like that. Not like highly stylized like that. So it does make it seem like it is a job, and kind of what it kind of focuses on, and what it kind of takes interest in, and kind of studies is the Clarice Starling character. And kind of what kind of person would want a job like this? What specifically, especially when it is, with serial killers in such a dark area of police work, that would make them have an interest in it, and have a passion for it, and have this burning desire to figure out these cases. And so with Clarice Starling, I mean, she's definitely a very interesting character. She starts out as a an up-and-coming trainee in the FBI. She's still in training, and what it kind of does really effectively, and not too, again, not too over the top, and uh, not too much in a way that takes away focus from the story. Like, we get little bits and pieces of her psyche and her psychology, and how, we figure out going along with the movie that there's something in her past, something about her father, that, something bad happened, he died, and so we figure that in flashbacks, but the rest of it we figure out through Hannibal Lecter. So in a strange kind of way, we have the same kind of curiosity about Clarice, that Hannibal Lecter has. And the thing about it, of course, the quid pro quo, is that he tells her things that are relevant to the Buffalo Bill case, because he pretty much, as the movie starts, you can pretty much tell, like, especially if you watch it enough times, he pretty much knows right away. But he's just toying with everybody. And if it weren't for Clarice, he would have no reason to give away any information. So he, as a psychiatrist who's psychotic, eats people, locked away for the rest of his life, he sees as an opportunity to kind of probe her brain. And so it's like, you tell me things, I tell you things, but not about the case, but about her personal life. And so that's his fascination with her, which I thought was brilliantly done. And like, it's very intense. Like, from the very first scene that they have together, you can tell that he has her pegged. He knows something about her, and why she's kind of doing what she's doing. He reveals something about her that's pretty harsh, but in a sense true. That she's trying to advance and rise up, and not just be poor white trash basically. And that's kind of her drive as well, and her darkness, and he figures out more about her. And kind of like, really, the whole appeal of this movie is the relationship between the two. Like, every single scene that they have is precious. Those are the scenes that we're watching the movie for, and they do definitely have a certain kind of chemistry on screen together. And it's hard to describe. It's like, you can't really say that it's a love story kind of thing, because it's not necessarily that they're in love, but they do have this relationship, and almost like a partnership, where they're kind of solving the case together, and kind of fencing back and forth, so to speak. And that's really what the appeal of it is, I think. It is between the Hannibal Lecter and Clarice character. They may have taken it a little too far with Ridley Scott's film, where it does kind of sort of become like this love story, but it's not quite that, because it is just impossible for it to even comprehend, to consider it being a love story, is kind of what makes it all the more interesting, and their relationship all the more different, and very just fascinating. This whole movie's fascinating, and of course it's just creepy as hell. This movie really still gives me chills to this day. Probably the only Academy Award nominated film where the main character has had splooge slapped in their face by a crazy person. Probably. Definitely probably one of the more violent movies, although it's not that, there's not too much violence on screen. A lot of it is post-mortem stuff, and you see the aftermath, like, but something like, when the girl Catherine Martin is in Buffalo Bill's well, it puts the lotion on its skin, and you see that one part where he's bringing up the basket, and you see on like the sides of the well, you see fingernails and blood trails that, like, someone was there before trying to get out, and she's just screaming, oh my god. And that one part where there was the dead girl in the coroner's office, where they're investigating, they take out the little pod, the little cocoon, the butterfly cocoon, but when they take it out, you hear like a, and it was like her last breath, and oh my god, it's intense. It's an intense movie. And Buffalo Bill, of course, a very scary character, and kind of what not within the movie, but kind of the aftermath of the movie, was that, not too unreasonably, but people were protesting of its portrayal of a transsexual character, which I can't understand, but I mean, it almost, look, they even say in the movie he's not really a transsexual. He just hates his own identity and he wants to be something else, which is the point of the character. And so it's a little unfair that they highly criticize this movie on Oscar night when it won. There are people outside picketing, so that tells you a lot of, kind of the aftermath and what kind of trouble it sort of got into. But of course, Jonathan Demme ended up making Philadelphia, with a gay character suffering with AIDS, so that was kind of his response to that, I guess. But aside from that, I mean, it was quite amazing that it won all these awards. I mean, it was up against some, highly acclaimed movies that year, like Prince of Tides, Beauty and the Beast, what have you. So for it to win, I think this is definitely one of the more interesting choices that they went with for a Best Picture winner. And aside from that, I mean, it is one of my favorite movies. I think it's exceptional, and scary and interesting, and there's just something about it that keeps me coming to it every single time. The performances are just brilliant. Of course, Anthony Hopkins, exceptional Hannibal Lecter. I mean, I love Mads Mikkelsen. I love Brian Cox from Manhunter. But Tony Hopkins, he got it down. He just created this just perfect rendition of the character, I think. Just so seductive and creepy and charming and just off-putting but engaging at the same time. Like, that's hard to pull off. So, I mean, it's no wonder that this is still his most memorable role. Like, this is obviously going to be the role 100 years after he's dead. People will go back to this role and say that was brilliant, and he well deserved the Oscar. Jodie Foster as well, just brilliant. I mean, definitely this was her second Oscar that she won. She really matches up against. She's a more subtle performance, but her performance is just as much intense, and even like the subtleties of her performance, like Hannibal Lecter mentions that I can see a hint of pure West Virginia in the accent, but you're trying to hide it, and that you can kind of like you see that like you hear that in the movie, like that she does have this sort of muddled accent, but it sounds like she's trying to hide that. I thought that was brilliant, the way she did it, and just her unflinchable force against Hannibal Lecter, like anybody else in that situation, I mean, they would be gone. And 5 seconds, Hannibal Lecter would creep them out. And the fact that she is so smart, I mean, basically what I would say is kind of like the key moment of the movie is that Hannibal Lecter gives her that hint near the beginning, where he says, "Search deep within yourself." For the patient Moffat, or his former patient Moffat, like the fact that she picked up on, okay, that he was just hinting at something else, so it was really to go to a yourself storage, and that's where she gets more hints. And if she didn't figure that out, the movie's over in 10 minutes. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny. If I were like an FBI agent, I would never figure that out, and I would not star in a movie. And it is something that. She is in this, especially in this type of movie, like especially when you had seen it previously in Manhunter, where the main character, the protagonist, is a male. To have a woman character in a movie like this, and to make her strong, resourceful, whatever, I think it's kind of an insult to say, oh, it's a strong woman. What a different thing to see. No, I mean, it's not quite like that, but the fact that they acknowledge that she is a woman in this field, and it is, somewhat unusual that she is in that field, and the fact that she's not harassed, but it's just like the little things, like the guys, look at her like, seductively, and there's that one scene where she's running with her other student, and you see all the guys running, and they look back, and Frederick Chilton hitting on her, like, they acknowledge something like that when they wouldn't necessarily have to, but it is kind of an issue, and kind of what makes the character all the more interesting. That if she were a man, she wouldn't have to deal with any of this kind of shit, but such is the case, and kind of strangely enough, within this whole world of FBI and procedural, the person who treats her as an equal and doesn't, sexualize her is Hannibal Lecter, and to a certain extent Jack Crawford too, who's also brilliant. Scott Glenn is really great in the role. But yeah, I mean, it's such a unique movie, and it has just so many ideas to it, and just the way Jonathan Demme kind of presents it. It's not too flashy of a movie. It doesn't really present any kind of false scares, I think. It just presents it at face value. Like, I'm sure they could have done the whole section of the film where the film basically stops short, as it should, because it's such a great scene, where Hannibal Lecter escapes, and of course, he has the face and he takes it off, and so brilliant. But they don't make it too flashy, and they don't make it too violent either. Like, even though you see a character crucified with his guts hanging out, they don't dwell on it, which is probably kind of the reason why people didn't quite like the sequel Hannibal quite as much, because they kind of just the opposite. They indulge in that stuff, like like Ray Liotta sitting there with his brain sticking out, but whatever. But really, really, this is one of the all-time greats. One of my favorite movies. One of the best movies to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, in my opinion, of course. Just a masterpiece. Scary, interesting, thrilling. Just a very cerebral film, very subversive, very seductive in the performances and the plot itself, and it ends so great. The ending is just so great. I'm having an old friend for dinner. It's so good, so good. So yeah, all the Oscars well earned. A classic, one of my favorites, one of the all-time greats. So if you have not watched this movie, what the hell is wrong with you? Stop watching this video right now. Go watch Silence of the Lambs. It's one of the greats. So that'll about do it. So thank you very much for watching.